Hello survivors and welcome to Now That's What I Call Survival Horror, the first aid spray show where we talk about the music of video games, of horror video games, of Resident Evil video games. My name is Sai and joining me on this episode is Steve.
Hi everybody!
And on this episode, actually it's funny because I feel like a couple of us have fallen into a bit of a theme with episodes, or at least me and you. I did both Remake 2 and 3. And you've now done Revelations, and you're here with your top 10 tracks for Revelations too, so that kind of works out nicely. Revelations was an interesting one because we did it quite early on in the show as a bit of a surprise diversion from doing things in order. And it was nice and refreshing to do that. So it's exciting to get back to that series because we haven't really talked about it a whole lot over the course of First Aid Spray's history yet. Obviously, those days are certainly coming at some point. But yeah, as usual, this is all opinion-based. Steve has picked his favourite pieces of music from the Revelations 2 soundtrack and ranked them from 10 down to 1. You may or may not agree. You can let us know in the comments down below what your favourites and least favourites of the soundtrack are. Highlights, lowlights, etc. But yeah, just don't get mad, basically. Or do, maybe that's good for the algorithm. I don't know.
I mean, if they want to get mad, just remember that I am always right and you're always wrong. Not you, Si, you're lovely, but anyone who's angry in the comment section, come at me, bros. Waves fists. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, now that we've got everybody's backs up, let's get into it. Steve, would you like to take it away with your number 10?
Okay, number 10. Lost. Enchained version. Cheating out of the gate with a re-instrumentation of the last Revelations game's main theme. It's almost a statement of intent, I feel. It's just got a few changes so it feels less classically horror of the piano and it's more grindhousey and messy and a little bit organic with its tone. It's very, a tasteful re-instrumentation.
Yeah, I think it's really good as a setup for Revelations 2, you're right, and it's really good that they have taken a theme like this. I really appreciate when series kind of reinterpret pieces of music, especially in the case of something like a side series like Revelations. We have a Revelations theme, or at least one, which is this, which I really love that in general. We talked at length about this. I mean, to not spoiler it too much, it ranked pretty high on your Revelations 1 list, so it's really funny to kick off with this. In terms of Grindhouse, that is a perfect shout, really. If you listen out, there's mysterious clattering and knocking noises in the background that feel like some of the locations in the game, like the prison and stuff like that. That comes to mind. It's just grimy. I don't watch the Saw movies. I've got a bit of a weak stomach for that kind of thing, but I would expect this is the kind of music that you get out of those sort of flicks, really. Grimy, it's scarier than the original. For me, the original is a bit more, emotive, American drama. That's kind of what Revelations 1 goes for. But yeah, it's hard to pick a favourite for me out of the two after listening back to this one. I really like the first one, but this is also really good in its own way.
Yeah, when we inevitably get, Revelations 3, I'm wondering what other genre of horror they're going to go for. Because we know we've had Grindhouse, we've had classic horror, so surely now we have to go full-on sci-fi horror, but how do you go over-the-top sci-fi horror in a franchise that already is, that.
Yes. I'm glad your mind went exactly to where I went. Not only, I really want to hear what this would sound like now if they'd done it, because it's been good many years since Revelations 2. Whether or not we get a Revelations 3, who knows. But I also thought, it's going to be, I want the synthwave version of this, please.
Someone call Mono Memory up and get them to do a proper... Yeah. So number 9, Up the Pace. So, from the beginning of the game, we just had Lost, and now we're almost at the very end of the game, or very close to the end. And, you know, it does have a few moments in raid mode, but this is like basically Claire and Moira's escape theme as they lead the descent, as they descend the crumbling tower. Right? It's got a nice little punchy heartbeat with strings and like tense rise, like, and then scurrying drum beats. You know, it's not like, I would say it's not on par with its PS1 contemporaries, like, you know, Escape from the Lab, etc. You know, I mean, that one ranked pretty high in RE2, if I say so myself. But, you know, and raid mode, like, definitely overuses this theme. But overall, as a classic style escape theme, you know, it is still pretty creepy and it's pretty tense. You know, I like it.
Yeah, I think it's a interesting shout comparing it to the older themes, for sure. In many ways, though, and it partly possibly because of, you know, the quality of sound in video games over the years, but it reminds me more of like Remake 2's escape themes. Thundering percussion, the use of synthetic stuff with traditional instruments. Yeah, this is a really major point of the game, and so rightfully it needs to have some kick-ass music, and this is some kick-ass music. There's like I don't know if you call it like a bass line, or what it's played on, maybe a tuba or something, brass and low, but there's a sort of rhythm to this that's very memorable for me. But I think that mostly it stays with me because it's really choppy, so it feels really unique because it sort of stops and starts a bit, which really works for the fact you're in a big tower that is just slowly sliding apart as you try and get down to safety. Very memorable moment for the game. Music certainly helps, and vice versa, really. Yeah,
I'm still like mentally picturing the outside of the tower and falling concrete and getting progressively more and more annoyed by these weird platforms that shouldn't exist, but, you know.
Yeah. Thanks for the PTSD.
Okay. Number 8, Afflicted 2. Okay, so this one is kind of threatening. You know, it's brief, but, you know, it sounds like a stumbling piano with lots of sharp build-ups, and it's much like, you know, very similar in tone to what the creatures are. I feel like, you know, it's very loud and obnoxious, but, you know, it's more loud than it is threatening. You know, it's spooky, and it leaves an impression that it sounds like a spare Silent Hill 1 song someone found behind the back somewhere, you know? A bit proto-Akira Yamaoka. But the constant chiming does, like, give it a good pressure emphasis, and it just kind of, like, it sticks in my head, you know? It makes me feel like time's running out.
A lot of classic horror tropes in this one, absolutely. Like just like the abuse of a violin in this, absolutely. I don't know how you describe those noises that you get in a lot of horror, like scratching sounds, or sort of weird plucking noises. It's the sound of your hair standing on end, really. I'm sure folks know what I mean when I talk about it, though. I just don't know how you describe it. It's imposing because it feels like it's coming right at you. It feels like it's pointed directly in the center. It has this constant, as you say, repetitive bam, bam, bam to it. But best of all, as it sort of changes throughout the game and the pace changes, so too does the sort of rhythm, but it's still there. There's still a constant bang, bang as you go. Stumbling is the great word for it. It's exactly what I had. It's stumbling. It's coming at you from different directions. Yeah, it's a really effective piece of music, even if, yes, the Afflicted are kind of just like grunts, basically. Like, it's perfect zombie music.
I'm just thinking, what if Ganados were incredibly drunk, is what the Afflicted always tend to drive me out. Okay. Number 7, Overseer 2. lots of sequel tracks. I apologise, everybody. You know, there's just something about the way Revelations 2 does it, and you know, there's like 14 different variations for each thing. This one has a like constant low electrical feedback noise, like the mic has been left on while Alex is watching our hero scurry and, you know, through the traps and the monsters and like. But you know, there's lots of synth pads doing the real legwork. They found like kind of like Trent Reznor stuff, you know, like Nine Inch Nails or Spare Quake music. You know, I'm half expecting a bit of poetry to be recited over the way this is. But you know, it could be considered maybe a little monotonal. But, you know, it's also like someone's spare Command and Conquer music, and we always love that in this household.
Is there a horror Command and Conquer? Has there ever been a horror RTS?
Horror?
If not...
Oh, God, surely, right?
I can feel that coming around the corner if it doesn't already exist. Yeah, like in terms of the structure of the soundtrack, I really wish I'd had time to listen to Revelation 2's soundtrack, because it is quite dense, and there's a lot of those, as you say, variations on a theme kind of thing. If this soundtrack has not a leitmotif, but like a memorable sound, it is that big bass note thing, a big wow. You know, I remember that stands out to you pretty quickly when you're playing through the game for the first time. And I think there's a short little refrain in here about 6 notes on the violins. I think they come back throughout the soundtrack as well, or at least through the sort of Overseer series of tracks. You know, either way, this really stood out to me. This is really memorable. I remember this vividly. It's a really good reference point for what Revelations 2 soundtrack is, as that sort of grindhouse being the operative word that we said. Mishmash of traditional stuff and synthetic stuff, whatever's lying around, really. And there's a light drum beat sort of thing in the background to this that keeps it moving. It just sort of sounds like an electrical cable sort of left sparking hanging from the ceiling. As a theme for Alex Wesker, the Overseer stuff is really cool, and listen back to it really makes me miss Revelations 2 story and the fact, you know, where it went, and the fact that we haven't had a follow-up to it. I'm really glad that she got almost like her own little palette of music here, Alex Wesker.
I mean, yeah, like not to like, you know, cart before the horse at everybody, but you know, I would fully encourage you go and listen to the gargantuan epic that is the Revelations 2 soundtrack. There's like 14 different variations of some things, but they all bring like something a little bit unique to the table. Like, for example, obviously I've picked like Overseer 2, Afflicted 2. They all do something different, and they're not necessarily just stronger instrumentation of their first ones. So yeah, once you're done with this, go give it a look. Honestly, it's a good time. Number 6, Survive. Okay, so now we've gone from like synthpad Command and Conquer music to Metal Gear sneaky music with the occasional The Thing stabs. You know, it's used in Moira's, you know, the Struggle expansion during her stealth sneaky stuff. You know, but it feels very like Hollywood action thriller. And I can just, you know, it doesn't really fit the character of Moira, but maybe I miss her character so much I'm kind of simping for it. But yeah, it is a fun short loop of just dun 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 dun. And yeah, it snuck up the soundtrack list somehow because I kept listening to it and yeah, I like this, it's groovy.
Do you know what? It's funny about this on sort of both ends of that is that I mean, spoiler, I love Revelations 2, but also spoiler, I've actually not played the DLC chapters. Despite my love of the game, I really should go back and play The Struggle and Little Miss, because I don't think I touched them. I might have watched a bit of them, but I don't think I've ever played them myself. So I'm not sure that I ever heard this until you were like, right, this is on the list. But I feel like I'm going to keep listening to it now. You're so perfectly on point with Metal Gear versus The Thing. You know, I just riffed off mic that it sounds a bit like Snatcher, which is another Kojima game. In general, though, it's got big throwback vibes. 80s movie infiltration scenes. I don't know what that thing in the beginning is. It sounds like a vibraphone with a ton of reverb playing the main melody. It just gives a really different texture to the rest of the soundtrack. Intrigues me about the DLC, which is, you know, again, being a separate piece of media with a DLC, it kind of allows them to be a little bit weird with it. Maybe it doesn't fit Moira, you're right, but being a DLC, you can kind of get a bit loose with it.
I mean, who am I to judge? She might have been a really big Metal Gear fan. The game could exist, and she's like, you know what, I'm going to be like Snake.
Does she tie a headband around her? Is that?
She gets a scarf. She does wear like slight militaristic stuff on top of what she's normally wearing.
Yes. Yeah, I do remember that image at least. There's also there's this weird sort of suffocated sound in the background. This feels like it comes straight out of Parasite Eve. I'm laughing about this because we literally just did the Parasite Eve podcast, and the Parasite Eve episode of Now is next up on the podcast feed. So it feels like that's all we talk about at the moment. I like Parasite Eve, but that sound in the background of this is straight out of the spooky music from Parasite Eve as well. So yeah, a lot going in with this. I don't know if it really, you're right, fits with the Revelations 2, but it's an undeniably good piece of music, so...
Number 5, Revenant 2.
Yeah, I know this one. We're good.
Yeah, this one leaves a mark on everybody, I think, the first time you hear it. Right. So, I know I've already said this, but this is basically like, yet another second is the one that peaks for Steve, much like, in the RE2 one, we thought second malformation of G was better than third. And, yeah, it just puts a stronger foot forward for me, right? This track feels the most on tone for the creatures out of the whole set. It's very erratically violent feeling. It's deadly and macabre, with a dash of weird otherworldly breathing, and then these like snake rattles. And like, I'm pretty sure the Silent Hill 1 air raid siren is making a cameo appearance. So it's a really tense track, and I can just picture those those trees where Barry and Natalia have to run and like basically evade them. You could also argue it's got like a kind of a slasher film kind of vibe, almost the cha-cha-cha-cha of like a Friday the 13th film.
Yeah. This is really, really good. That sort of piano run that immediately kicks it off just is wild. Grabs your attention. As you say, I feel like you don't get a lot of music, for obvious reasons, that plays really fast in horror. Because I guess it could, border on a bit goofy. But in this, it's deeply unsettling because of it, because you're not used to hearing it. That piano kicks you in the face. And then even better, when the track kicks in proper, it sort of fades off into something else. Some other instrument just sort of question and answers with it a little bit. Yeah, there's a part that feels like a ticking clock with some, I don't know if that's like guitar string picking and scraping, which really adds to that slasher feel, that feeling of being hunted. And you're right, the air raid siren. What's cool about that, to me, is that it doesn't actually, finish. You don't hear the end of the air raid siren as it rotates around that sound. It just kind of... it descends a little bit. It sort of slips out of place and then it stops. And then there's just like a wall of noise that replaces it. Yeah, this is utterly terrifying music. So, love it.
Yeah, it's the little diddler diddler diddler. I could just literally, I can mentally picture a Revenant flipping up out of the grass and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Very evocative.
Yes.
There's a reason why it's the halfway point on the list, everybody. We get it. It's nothing but bangers from here, okay? I promise.
This is the stuff that makes me want to play Revelations 2, coming back to this.
Number 4. Okay, no one get mad, okay? Heat on Beat 2015/Raid Mode. can hear the comment section now, okay? Right, on a survival horror soundtrack, you pick this? Alright, but listen, okay? Sometimes, but not all times, horror needs action, okay? And gosh dang it, for years, I was a recovering raid mode addict. And this song was just like the catalyst for it, okay? Right, it's part rave, it's part dubstep, it's all... It's motivation. And in terms of bonus mode music, it is pretty up there. And yes, it is also a remix of the RE6 Mercs theme.
If I had a one-word response to this, it would be yes. Look, with the show, a name is a name, Now that's what I call survival horror. We thought it was just a fun name. It does mean that so far we've just talked about horror and horror adjacent, and maybe we will only ever do that. Who knows? But the point is, if it's on a horror soundtrack, then we can talk about it. If this was my list, this might be number one. But, it's very similar to another track that I raved about on a previous episode. Die Hard, now that's what I call survival horror fans, will know what I'm talking about. So obviously I have a bit of a weakness to this sort of thing. It's I've spent a lot of time listening to this music as background music while I work on something. But Rev 2's raid mode, you're absolutely right, is so good. It's the only sort of additional mode in Resident Evil that I've played when the game's come out and stuck with for a little bit. Like I've obviously gone back to stuff like 4's Mercenaries, having never played it before and stuff. But Rev 2 was the first one that really, really grabs me. And it's so good. It's a real good motivator. You need separation from the main campaign's music. So, as a dumb arcade blastathon, this is absolutely the right route to go with it. And it still has Alex Wesker's, war bass note thing in there.
See, it's on theme.
Yes, exactly. It still fits, kind of. This is just a much more hype version of 6's, isn't it? I don't think it is a big departure, but it is much better for me. I've listened to this a lot.
Sound off in the comment sections below in how it should have been number one.
That's right. Fight.
Okay. Number 3 then. Black and White. Okay, so no, this is not the Michael Jackson song Black or White. It's the main track for Little Miss. The other DLC Sai hasn't played. All right? this one's like, it's kind of whimsical, it's disarming, but it's got like this underlying aura of menace and mischief. To me, it gets this high up the list because of how different it is compared to everything else. It's almost like a fairy tale overture with what is about like a demon trying to corrupt an innocent, which is basically the plot of the actual DLC, really. It's very sad and lonely, it's got these weird xylophones to it, and then there's this occasional creepy static and feedback, which is more in line with the rest of Rev 2 stuff. It's just out of earshot, but you can kind of like piece together what's going on in Little Miss, especially if you know the general beats of the story. Trying to dance around that particular lore topic right now. But yeah, it's a bit creepy, this.
Yeah, I feel silly for not knowing this one again, because, haven't played it. It's got that sort of like approach that you would have with Spooky Child or Spooky Child-driven story, but I think that it really does avoid being totally obvious. It doesn't riff on any nursery rhymes or even like a toy box was the really obvious go-to. Because I don't know what that is. It's been put through synthesizers. It definitely feels like a xylophone or whatever. But yeah, sad and creepy, you're right. If anyone was upset by Heat on Beat, then you brought them back around at this point. This is very unique for the series, I think. We don't really have a lot of this kind of stuff. If anything, this actually makes me think of something like Final Fantasy IX. It's got big ice cave energy to it. It's mysterious, it's chilling, literally and figuratively. I'm sure it works wonders for where it's placed. As I say, I haven't played it, but as a piece of music, yeah, can't really complain.
2 thumbs up, exactly.
Exactly.
And following those 2 thumbs up, number 2, it's everyone's favourite fanfic writer, Distant Memories. Okay, right. You finally got me, everybody. This is the first time I've done one of these, and I've actually done a save room. Essentially a spiritual successor to a save room. What is a Resident Evil game without save rooms to do? Where would you put the music other than when the chapters break? It fits into that pantheon with its own bleak yet wistful tone, and it's got strings and piano chords with the odd discordant metal scrape, reminding you that you could be comfortable, but there's no place to stay, and you can't just hide here forever. It's relaxing, but still a little creepy. It's a nice little juxtaposition, and therefore it's at number 2.
Yeah, I think you're bang on here. So good, as you say, that our file-writing friend named himself after it. So, and it is the closest thing to a save room theme, and by extension, perhaps it's also in general, or maybe just in general, the closest thing that fits with sort of the soundtracks of the original PS1 games. But it's still identifiably Revelations, which makes it a relevant name then, doesn't it? Really, Distant Memories. I think this is one of the more relaxing quote-unquote save themes or adjacent save themes, but which makes sense because it's a sort of chapter moment when you can take a second between whatever the last big boss fight was and whatever happens next. But yeah, it's still got that despair in the strings. It's all those instrumentations that you'd expect out of a save room theme or something that's aping that. I don't think there's a lot of danger to it. It's just, simply beautiful and simple. The main rhythmic melody to it sounds almost like it was made on glass bottles or something, which is really nice. This is the sort of piece of music that you or I would listen to and think, oh, this is nice and relaxing. Because I say all this, someone who doesn't listen to or isn't a fan of horror stuff will come up to you and go, why are you listening to this? It's making me uncomfortable.
What are you listening to funeral music for?
Yeah. But to us, we're like, yes, this is comfy.
See, I still to me, it's still got an element of disquiet. Maybe it's just, maybe I'm just built different. I don't know. But yeah, the closest thing to a save room theme in the game, and you got me on the list with it. So there we go. Number 1, theme of Barry. Capcom just casually punching way above its weight and making me almost cry. Okay. So this track makes me feel things, right? We're talking grief, regret, and overall it's probably the most movingly somber music I think I've picked out on this entire show so far.
Yeah.
It's something about it has more of a Silent Hill feeling. The general tone and feel of it. It's as though Barry is about to face his own personal demons while looking for his dead daughter. Which, tracks if we're going for the bad ending. But, it's not in any way heroic or fanfare-laden like many of the other Resident Evil character themes. And it's kind of a really simple composition, really. It's piano and woodwind instruments, or at least it feels like that to me. It's Probably the one thing is it's a stretch for this being out of character with the whole franchise, but dang, like it has a lot of saddening charm, and it makes me tear up every time I hear it.
Yeah, I get that. Even just from those first two notes, you're like, okay, we're in for a ride with this one. I feel like we definitely made this joke before. I can't remember where. It was probably on this show about how one day Steve will make a soundtrack of what he thinks each character's theme is, picked out from the soundtrack. It's very rare that you get theme of this character in Resident Evil. So Barry gets a little honourable mention there. And you're right, maybe it doesn't fit him across the board, but for the context of where it plays in the game and his story in the game makes it really powerful. It continues the sort of humanization of the character from the end of way back in Remake with his regret over betraying his team to save his family. You know, Barry being a man that's sort of haggard by this point, not just with age and the passage of time, but, with his mistakes in life and what's happened to his family and his friends. So when you think of that and you listen to this, it makes him feel like the perfect protagonist for like an action drama sort of movie. Almost feels like that's a part of Revelations 2 that they maybe even could have expanded on. But yeah, there's not much to this instrument-wise, but it does a lot with it. There's lots of key changes, lots of new melodies weaved in as it goes on. I forgot that it was quite as long as it is, but it's really nice all the way through. I appreciate this insight into, where the writers were coming from and where the composers were coming from when they were writing for Barry. And yeah, it makes him more than just the meme lord, doesn't it? Everyone wants to do the Jill sandwich and all that, but like you forget all the stuff that he's been through. And he was, we talked about it before, but he's the most three-dimensional character in the original game, really, because of what he goes through. And by this point, he's had a whole life in between those two moments.
I mean, yeah.
Fantastic piece of music to wear headphones to and just get lost in.
If you just listen to it and you hear Barry's life story, he's had to betray his friends at least once. Yes, they forgive him. He's had to hide his children. One of his children had then shot one of his children, and now that child is missing and is trying to find him. And all the while he's got a young charge to look after, and they're going through a lot of trauma at the same time. It is some heavy stuff on the old beard and Magnum lad. It's a lot. This track also kind of, reminds me a lot of the close of the original ending of Village. Not the DLC ending, but the one with, Ethan and the thing that I'm not trying not to spoil. Very similar kind of like parental sadness theme going on. Yeah, when I was first making this list, this is the track that started making me just think about stuff and make me cry. And damn, I don't know how, in not to go a bit further into the weeds, it's the final one. I'm going to embellish a bit here.
Yeah, for sure.
But you look at Marvel vs. Capcom and they put Chris's theme in, and he's got the Rust and Summer Mercenaries 5 from RE5. Wesker's got his boss theme from RE5. Jill's got her boss theme from RE5. You ever put Barry in one of these things, poor lad has got to figure out a new track, because you can't have this as a dancey, threatening fighting game theme. Sad dad ain't going to do it. It's poor Barry, he needs a break.
Yeah, bless him. Yeah, we all want him back, but also just let him rest.
Yeah, come back, but also don't.
I just want him to be happy. Yeah, this is absolute. If I had been asked, I said earlier, Heat on Beat #1, whatever, but I can't argue with this. This should absolutely be #1. It's so poignant considering where it plays in the game, and as you say, all the story leading up to that, not just throughout the series and in Revelations 2, what perspective you want to come from. Low key, this is one of the most emotionally powerful pieces of music in Resident Evil history. And it's in Revelations 2, a game that most casual fans probably haven't even heard of, let alone played. Rev 2's a bit good, isn't it?
A bit good. So, are we doing honourable mentions? The ones that didn't make the cut? Yeah,
you've got a couple. Let's do it.
Okay, so my first honourable mention is Deep Sea Darkness version. It's mostly there as a callback, and it's got a nice little new ominous dark motif in the middle that makes it different from its original counterpart. But it's still mostly a remix, and I thought not putting two remixes in the same list, so it's basically number 12 or number 11. And my last would have been Seek and Pray, High-Speed Heroes, which is basically, it's another raid mode banger. Again, it fits the theme of an action game while it's, doing its, making me head nod, and I just, I like it a lot, but I can't justify putting the list. It's got some really nice build-ups, like though, it's, oof, yes please. It's like someone burgled some spare Tekken music in it, mate.
When you see it written down, you don't think about it, but the way you said it out loud makes it sound like a Saturday morning cartoon. Seek and Pray, High-Speed Hero, or like a TV, like a toy commercial.
I'm pretty sure that's how it was intended when they wrote the track.
I think it must be, because as you say, it's high energy raid mode theme. It's perfect alongside Heat on Beat. Yeah, it's really... Yeah, this one's got a bit more horror in it as well, which I really appreciate. It rides the line a little bit more, but it would fit in a Resident Evil fighting game, which I kind of want now. And Deep Sea, yeah, again, I love that connection to Revelations 1. I did always find it funny that it's called Deep Sea. I know it's set on an island, but I was like, it hasn't really got anything to do with the ocean, does it now? So you should have changed the name a little bit. But I think I prefer the original over this one.
Yeah.
But... this absolutely has its charms, and it's good that they did something with it, and again, carried on those connections.
Oh, I mean, I'm just thinking, what bit of the game do we have on the ocean? Literally, it's just Barry with his boat at the start.
Barry and his boat, yeah.
Can't really fit it there, can we?
Indeed. Right, well, that is Steve's top 10 tracks from Resident Evil Revelations 2, plus honourable mentions. As we said at the start of the show, do let us know what your favourite pieces of music are from the soundtrack. Did you agree with this? Did you agree with that number one? Did you agree with Heat on Beat, etc.? Yeah, make sure that you support the show. You can subscribe to us here on YouTube. Obviously, episodes of Now That's What I Call Survival Horror do eventually come to our podcast feed as well. And you can get episodes early by checking us out on patreon.com/FA-SPRAY-POD. And supporting First Aid Spray. We appreciate you. Steve, I appreciate you for bringing this solid list of music to talk about.
Aww. Now play that DLC.
Yeah, I should do that, shouldn't I? Cool. I think that's everything from us. Thanks for checking out this episode of Now That's What I Call Survival Horror. And of course, have a good week.